Hello there, JerganJaze, you know? So, a little bit different of a video, but actually hoping to do some more stuff like this in the future. It's not a vlog, technically, but I was gonna do a bookshelf tour. I technically have 3 bookshelves, but we're gonna do that, because I'm gonna be doing some more book-type content in the future, for both manga and for fantasy slash sci-fi stuff that I read, novels. Um, I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh yeah. So with that, probably the next video that you're gonna see, kind of 4 books, is I'm going to do like a series review, not necessarily a book review, but a series review of a trilogy I recently finished, and I'm going to, while doing the review, it's going to have a time lapse of me doing a fan art piece, drawing, painting, whatever you want to call it, as the background for it, and then me talking over that instead of just the plain time lapse and stuff. It's a piece idea I've had for a bit, but also I think it'd be kind of a fun way to do a review, because I see mostly book reviews is just people sitting there and then they flash visuals that they find online. Why not make my own visuals and give you something a little bit more entertaining to look at than my face most of the time, which you already get to see when I play games. So as we go along, we have 3 bookshelves to get through. I might spiel as I happen to feel about it, but I'm also doing this because I don't talk to anybody much about the fantasy stuff that I read, and I would really like to. So what better way than to do it here? Granted, I know my normal audience, this isn't what they're used to, but maybe they'll find something of interest of this. Anyways, so at first this was like a classic fantasy, or like modern classics as well, because really the only classic fantasy that I have is Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis is at another spot now. But Lord of the Rings plus Hobbit, all of the Song of Ice and Fire minus Fire and Blood. I kind of refuse to buy / read that until we get Winds of Winter. For those of you who don't know, Game of Thrones, the series based off of the books aren't done. He hasn't released the 6th book for 8 years now, since he last released Dance with Dragons. So we have them. You'll notice I have a little bit of decor. I try not to keep it too cluttered. I want to make it about the books. All of Wheel of Time, which I'm in the middle of right now. I'm on book 10, Crossroads of Twilight, reading that at the moment. Only about a little over 100 pages in. I annotate these as I go, since it is such a massive series. Some more manga. Pokemon Adventures, the collection series with them. I like Dragons and Skulls. This guy is actually supposed to have some wings on them. They broke off though. Just because I'm not careful. A mug I made. Notice the dragon up there. Some Skylanders. Mug I made because I'm an artist. These Helsing collections are not mine. They're actually my friends. And in this place usually goes The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, one of the series that kind of got me into fantasy. Then we have another dragon down here. We have self-help / like Christian living / studies kind of a thing, including Case for Christ there. And then along with one of my favorite I didn't know where else to put this, but one of my favorite novels, like standalone, it's just fiction, it's Life of Pi. Just really interesting how he interacts with religion, and I've done a few research papers on it for school, and just find the book really interesting. So then we have another dragon. This is a little Munchkins character from the card game. Move that out of the way though. We have Lies of Locke and Lamora, Red Sea. I can't read the font on that. It's the sequel, and then Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. I've read a little of this one. Haven't read the whole thing through, obviously, though. But the style is really beautiful, and I'm excited for when I do get around to it. Warbreaker, which is one of 2 Sanderson books that I've read. Need to read more Sanderson, but I'm in the middle of Wheel of Time, which was finished by Sanderson. I'd like to do that before I get into all of Sanderson's works. Then we have Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I actually never finished this one. Kind of going through a rough time in my life when I was reading it, so I only got about a third of the way in, and I still have that bookmark left. We have the first 3 books of the Dresden Files, Stormfront, Full Moon, and A Grave Peril. This used to be all of the Twilight books, but now it's just Twilight and Life and Death, which is kind of an add-on to it. I'd given it to someone I was dating, and then we never gave stuff back because I didn't really want to see them, if I'm being honest. Another dragon, and then let's shove that back. This is current study I'm doing. Some more Christian Living type stuff down there, and then that's just a bunch of crap through there. So moving on to our next shelf, which I'll hopefully get a good look out. I need to get a picture of that for the thumbnail. So we have, first of all, I can't say it, Sapkowski, Witcher. We have the illustrated one. This one, super beautiful, a little bit more expensive of a book. Not that bad though. I work at a bookstore, so that helps with discounts. And then his newest series, which I only have the first one of, and then the first 3 books of the actual Witcher that isn't the short stories. And the second short story collection has recently come out with an illustrated as well as some other really cool hardbacks. And I don't think I'll get the hardbacks because I did just buy these like several months ago. Haven't read this whole shelf, including Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Again, everything that I have, I'm super excited to get to. It's just a matter of when. So then we have Narnia, Dragon Riders of Pern. This is actually my dad's copy of it, so it's like a really old copy of the trilogy, but more classical fantasy, I suppose. I forgot I kind of had it. Well, modern classic, but goes back far enough, I feel like. Mistborn, which is the other Sanderson novel that I've read. I haven't continued it because at the time that I was reading it, I was doing it as an audiobook, and I kind of found out that I didn't really love audiobooks. So moving over here, another series I'm in the middle of. I've read The Blade itself. I've actually read a different version of it. I have a limited. Let me stand up really quick and show you that. It's up there. It's a cool little edition of it. It's actually a little smaller, but pretty edition. That's the one that I read. And then I bought the paperbacks because the paperbacks also look the graphic design on it very well done. The next to it, just because it's also apparently grim fantasy like Joe Abercrombie's work, or Abercrombie, is Age of Ash, which is Daniel Abraham, who makes up one half of James A. Corey. James A. Corey is a pen name. Daniel Abraham, and I can't remember the other guy's name, used to write The Expanse. I have this 10-year anniversary copy of Leviathan Wakes, the first book. Also haven't read that. Haven't read Age of Ash either, but they're super pretty looking. How can I not get them? Stuff I've been dying to get back to because I've read the majority of this and stopped because, again, just kind of a hard point in my life. Whenever I reach hard points, when you get depressed, it's natural that you kind of like don't really like and enjoy the things they used to enjoy and like. So that was one of those instances, but I loved so much of what I read of it that I've bought the rest of it minus the 5th book, which I can buy. I've just told myself I'm not buying anything until I read a lot of what's on my shelf because there is a lot to read. Pride of the Orange Tree, which I've read like the first couple chapters of, like in the bookstore to see if I wanted it or not, and I've heard nothing but great things about it. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, his first book outside of the inheritance cycle. And it's his first adult book, and it's a sci-fi book, so very new for him. Still haven't gotten it, but granted, I know the inheritance cycle isn't the best thing in the world, but I still have a lot of respect for Christopher Paolini because he got a lot of young adults, middle grade people like myself at the time to get into fantasy, and it was very much like a gateway fantasy book. So I'm excited to read this, and I know he has other books that he's planning on coming out with a series, but he's a slower writer, but this is a thick one, and I've heard good stuff all around about it, though. And then down here at the bottom of our shelf, we have Ted Dekker books that I own, or some of them. There's some more over on this other one. But the Ted Dekker books that I own, for those of you who don't know Ted Dekker, it's not like he's some big author or anything. He's just one of the first authors that I started to really like. His main body of work is the Circle trilogy, and a lot of his other stuff. So all of this, plus the Paradise trilogy, is all in the same world. It has some really cool kind of allegories to heaven and earth, or heaven, earth, and hell, redemption, things like that. It is a Christian fiction thing, so I mean, if you're not into that, then don't. But I mean, even beyond that, and like the pretty obvious themes, kind of like C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, beyond the obvious themes in there, it's still good fiction that I have found, and not a lot of people talk about him. Because I read these growing up, and it was one of the first like books series that I've been into. He's actually, these two I haven't read. I've read everything else by him. These two are newer ones that he's coming back to, so I want to reread everything just so I can read these two, and there's a third one that I know is already out, just haven't gotten it on my shelf yet. Paradise Trilogy, like I said, already part of that. Even though that is his main body of work, he has some other standalone novels, and this is my favorite project of his, which he did with Tosca Lee, who I've never read anything else from. But Forbidden is the first book, then Mortal, then Sovereign. And it like just describes emotion in just such a nice way, because the whole premise of it is that it's a dystopian world in the future. Feelings have been like completely taken out of like our genetics, except for fear, just so we can like be controlled, basically. And they wind up finding this blood vial, and then they drink out of it. There's some stuff that leads up to that. They drink out of it, though, and it gives them a select few people who happen to like drink out of it by accident. They start to feel again, and then it causes a lot of stuff to happen. Very cool dystopia. So, yeah, one of my favorite dystopias, if not my favorite. But if you're going to read anything by Ted Dekker, definitely read Forbidden, even as just like a standalone book. This one I've read more than the others, and you can tell it's kind of more worn. Definitely read it. It's a shorter book. Really good, even if it was co-authored. Maybe that's part of why it's so good. And then we have Stephen R. Lawhead, who's in kind of the same vein as Dekker. I have some of his other books. He also did like a spinoff of Pendragon and Arthurian Legend. My dad has those, actually, and it's part of why I started reading him. His son also wrote a couple of books. I've read one of them. I don't think I have them anymore, or I may, and they're just boxed up with some other stuff. Okay, and then we have our John Gwynne shelf, which I haven't read, but I've seen and heard stuff about his style, and it just seems really up my alley, and like the epic fantasy stuff just really gets to me, and the visuals of his stuff is just really sleek and nice, and it looks good. And sometimes looking good is like the only reason I buy stuff half the time, and that's good enough for me. Hopefully get it to it. I don't know if I'll be able to get to it this year, because I want to read more. It's just finding time is really hard, or dedicating myself to it. Anyways, my young adult shelf minus the Twilight stuff, because all of it wouldn't fit. Shadow and Bone trilogy, I don't like it. I only bought it and read it because of these two. I read these first, and before they blew up on TikTok, like when they first came out. And so I was kind of one of the initial readers who really liked Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, and they're up there with some of my favorite books. And part of why I like darker, grittier fantasy with like morally gray characters that are trying to find themselves, kind of helped me get into that. Hunger Games trilogy, Scythe, which I haven't read. Would like to, because I've heard it's like kind of like what these guys did. It's kind of like its equivalent in more modern day. Granted, those are pretty modern. And then my other Sanderson book that I have, which is Skyward, and don't know when I'll read it, but I got it super duper cheap, so I had the opportunity, and I know at some point or another I'm going to read all of Sanderson, minus his middle grade series, and like Legion. But yeah, moving on over, we have the bulk of my manga, which is mostly 2 series. There is a 3rd series that's tucked away behind JoJo here. But all Full Metal Alchemist, there's a lot more that are tucked away back here, and then Volume 11 my brother is currently reading. But the Full Metal edition of it, this is my favorite manga and anime of all time. Shorter when it comes to anime, 64 episodes, but for like a shonen with as much grandeur and depth that it has, that's super concise. JoJo, which is kind of the opposite, pretty thick series. This is full of them, and then as well as back up top there is full of them as well. I have all of parts 1 through 3, some of 5, not even the first volume of 5, and I have none of 4 and none of 6 through 8. And then back here, tucked away, just because I didn't have room for it, is my Dress Up Darling, which is probably one of my favorite romance animes, and I haven't read these, but I really like the anime and wanted to read them too. And then this is a little Munchkins like collection comic thing of some short stories from Munchkins. I'm going ahead and move my drawing tablet out of the way at the bottom there. You get to look into my trash can as I do so. Alright, and then all of Brent Week's stuff. Another author that got me like back into reading. I'm sorry, the camera's shaking a lot, I know. But author really love. I've not read 2 through 5 of Lightbringer. And again, Black Prism, I have not read physically. I've only listened to it as an audiobook, and again, it was same time as Mistborn, where I was kind of discovering that I didn't like audiobooks. They were 2 of the ones I tried out, and from what I hear, those are pretty good audiobooks. So it's not for me. I'm not dissing it as anything that people do and call it reading. I think it's a reading. It's perfectly valid and fine and all that. And then we have Angel Trilogy, which I have read. I've not read these copies though. I had borrowed someone else's, and wow, just an insane trilogy. Not the most. It's a pretty soft magic system. So not a lot of like really defined rules or anything going into it, but for a trilogy, it has such depth to its world, and like the lore of it's really cool. Just some of the best character writing I've ever read. Some just really insane situations that they get into. Can't say enough good about it. Definitely one of my favorite series of all time. Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. He just came out with book 2 of this series, and I mostly bought it because of the cover. Because, wow, look at that cover. It's very, like, illustrative. Almost looks like a concept art kind of a thing. So that's why I bought it. And I read the premise, and the premise seemed cool. So I got it. Visible Life of Addie LaRue. Also heard just a lot of good stuff about that one, and more of a, I think it kind of develops into like a romance type premise, and I've never read Schwab before, and I've heard a lot of good stuff about Schwab. TJ Klune, The House on the Cerulean Sea, really nice, wholesome read. Then we have Steel Crow Saga. I got that really cheap, seemed cool. It had some good recommendations. I know I've been kind of shaky with holding the phone. I do apologize about that. And then next to it, just because I happened to buy it like at the same time as Steel Crow Saga, I have the only magic book that I have, Ravnica, which has, I think, a picture of Nicole Bolas on the front of it and some other characters. Yeah, I think the other Planeswalkers. I used to be really into Magic as far as the card game, and the story behind it actually seems pretty interesting. And then I have the rest of my Tolkien stuff, which is just Silmarillion, Tales from Perilous Realm, and then all 3 volumes of History of Middle Earth, which has a lot to it and kind of reads like an encyclopedia and dictionary at times, as well as some short stories and other stuff into it, but we'll get to it at some point. Project Hail Mary, probably my favorite sci-fi book. Never read Martian before by Andy Weir, but Project Hail Mary, magnifique. If you want a standalone sci-fi, read it, please. I beg of you. Moving on down here, we actually have book I most recently finished up was Morning Star, which concludes me reading the Red Rising trilogy, which means that will be the video I mentioned earlier of the drawing review thing I'll be doing. That'll be about that. I will not be including Iron Gold and Dark Age because I haven't read those yet, but these are the prologue and epilogue to the Red Rising, and I know he has a couple of other books that he's just announced that are also in that same world. I really like the world. I'm glad he's expanding on it, but I hope after this duology that he's coming out with that he will write into other projects, because I would like to see his style applied to some other worlds, or I don't know, maybe this is like his main thing. We'll see. I mean, I have no problem, and maybe after Iron Gold and Dark Age, I'll be wanting even more. We'll find out. Then we have Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, all 5 of them. I got this in a little box set, and they're so slim. You could finish one in a day, easily. Then we have Ice Planet Barbarians, the only spicy, smuttier book, if you want to call it that I own. I've read more stuff like that. I just don't. I do and I don't like it. I can give opinions on that in a different video. Not knocking anybody who does like it. You're perfectly fine. Then I have some of my like short story collection type stuff. So this is Greek Myths and Tales, which is, you can't tell super well, but very glossy edition. And then we have Norse. And then I have all of Poe. This is the thing I used. If you saw the video of me reading The Raven with my dad while experiencing birthing pains, that's the book that we read that out of. Complete tales of H.P. Lovecraft, pretty similar to Poe. Necronomicon, which has some Lovecraft in it, but has a lot of other dark sci-fi and horror short stories in it by other well-known authors. And then we have R.L. Stein, and he has these that are like adult books. I mean, he's obviously known for Goosebumps, but my dad thought I would like these. They're really cheap, so I got them for me. And I've been wanting to try more horror, so yeah. And then, speaking of, we have 3 other horror books following this, and arguably Station 11 is kind of a horror book. Ghost Tree I've not read, but it just seemed interesting to me, and it's a novel, and it's not like an author like Stephen King or Dean Koontz or Joe Hill or Grady Hendrix that has like a huge body of work underneath them yet that I would feel obligated to get into after reading. So I'm starting pretty small with the horror stuff that I read, just because I, I haven't found, I guess, my niche within it, or maybe I've just not read enough, because these other 2 I had an appreciation for, but they were very much meant for people that already knew horror better than what I do, because of the subversion that they do in them and the like self-referential stuff, which My Heart is a Chainsaw, for those of you who really like slasher horror movies, really good. I would really recommend it for you. I can have a pretty good big inspiration for it. I mean, not inspiration, respect, that's the word. Respect for it, just because it is really nice and well written, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, but that's just because of, I think, my previous experience with horror not being that much and not really knowing slasher movies. And the main character is really hard to like, which is kind of the point, but I've seen a lot of people that were in that class with me when we read that book either fall one way or the other. Then we have Lovecraft Country, which isn't as referential to Lovecraft as I would have liked, and I've read a good bit of Lovecraft, hence, that. Um, but a lot of other sci-fi and horror ties, and interesting way to put racism into a new context, or like to analyze it and past history of it. And then Station 11, which got adapted into the HBO series, I think. It got adapted into a TV show. I've only seen the first episode of it. I don't plan to watch anymore, not because I thought the first episode was bad. I just don't do TV like that. I'm an anime kind of guy. So there you have it. You have all 3 bookshelves of mine as a little tour. And thank you for watching. If you liked it, if you have any ideas for any book stuff that you would like to see in the future, art or any ideas, I'm trying to be a bit of a variety channel and just do anything that interests me, because at this point, as small as I am, extremely small, I can throw anything out there and see what sticks, because I have nothing to lose. So yeah, just let me know what you guys think.